was just compelled to the action, and I was doing what I had always done. It ended up being I'm Not Alone.
Alec, can you talk about your role as producer and you know, what drew you to this project?
Well, I was drawn to this project not too long after Garin himself. Should I turn to the people? Hi. Back in 2012, I've known Garin, for those who don't know, which is everybody, I've known Garin for 20 years. We met in middle school in LA. We were the only two Armenians there, and we were cursed to be friends. So I found myself in 2012 in Armenia, helping a campaign of an opposition party run by his dad for parliament. And I wrote about it for American newspapers. I was back in 2013 when it was the presidential campaign, the opposition presidential campaign. These elections were rigged. But more than being rigged, it turned out that nobody outside of Armenia cared. The New York Times, I remember, I'll never forget. The blessed New York Times in 2013, after that election, despite all the evidence of rigging that was widely available, simply reprinted the press release offered to them by the spokesman of the Republican Party, that without much of a tremor, Serge Sarkisian had been reelected in a landslide, which was not the fact.
Who was the reporter? Who was the reporter?
Oh, I'll have to look it up. I probably blocked his name out of my mind, but I'll find it. It's easy enough to find. There's the internet now. So that's how I was involved heavily in both campaigns, and I was in Armenia for that whole year basically, and that's how I began. That's how I began, and I've been on that Bahramyan in front of those gates. I've touched some of those riot police. They've touched me.
And Alec's actually been arrested. I've been trying to get arrested in Armenia for a very long time. They never take me. But Alec, he's the first one they pick to take away.
It can happen in New York tonight. Not that hard. So, you know, you managed to interview, you know, both sides, as it were, in this film. Can you talk about how you accomplished that?
I mean, in the first place, it was a matter of principle. It's clear where my sympathies lie and what side of the line and my family have struggled on for many, many years. But I also have a background as a journalist and the grandson of a historian. And it was very important to me to try my very, very best to include the other side of the story. And some of the interviews were easy, and especially from the spokesperson and some of the others. But Serge Sarkisian himself, it took about a year of trying to get a meeting. I had several meetings with him. And ultimately was very clear with him who I was, what kind of film I was making, what he could expect from it, but the fact that I wanted him to tell his side of the story, and I didn't want him to come out as some cardboard cutout of a dictator. And I think for all his incredible flaws, and within the context of the destruction that he brought upon Armenia, I think his humanity still does come through, and I think the movie's stronger because of that. And within the context, I have to respect his decision to be a part of the film, knowing that, sort of entrusting to me how I would present him.
I'm curious what that interview was like, if you felt tempted to be confrontational, or or if you were making an extra effort to be respectful, or how that came across.
No, I mean, the revolution was the unmasking, was the disrobing. I wasn't there to shake him down. That had happened. I was there more sincerely to get his side of the story, to talk to a man who could have made a decision to shoot the people, but didn't. I had to step outside of my own political beliefs and really try to be a good filmmaker, I guess, and really try to access his point of view.
And since this is a film festival, I believe it was a filmmaker, maybe it was Truffaut or another Frenchie, who said, the tragedy of life is that everybody has his reasons. And I think it's a tough lesson to digest when you've been as involved as we have and as pretty much every Armenian has in this story. It's a tough lesson to digest, but it's true.
Another Frenchie, Renoir.
Renoir.
Rules of the game.
Okay, in the same continent.
All right, let me take some questions from the audience right here.
Very quickly, Garin, can you quickly tell us how Armenian you are, your background?
Can you have your point? I think the exact expression was, can you explain how Armenian you are?
Now you have a slide, Tom.
I am as Armenian as the following. My name is Garin. Garin is a city in western Armenia which was destroyed during the Armenian genocide, where my great-grandparents are from, and that is why I'm named Garin. So, I guess I'm as Armenian as it gets.
My name is Alec. Alec is the name of a British actor named Alec Guinness. My parents really liked his work in The Bridge Over the River Kwai and named me after him. My folks are from the west, from Adapazar and Bursa and so on, and they are, of course, my ancestors were victims of the genocide. They ended up in Bulgaria, where my parents were born. My parents and grandparents escaped in the mid-60s through Beirut to LA, where so, all the way, in other words.
Before your next question, Tom, can I just say I think this movie is going to go on a journey, and I hope it's going to touch the hearts and minds of a lot of people, but it all began with Tom Powers selecting this movie for its world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. I tell Tom that he's not only supporting us as filmmakers, which he obviously is, but he's really he's really become a champion of the Armenian people in this very important story we have. So thank you so much, Tom.
My first grade teacher in Detroit was Mrs. Boyajian. So.
Maybe she's here.
Question in the very back.
Thank you so much for the work you did. I do have one question about the content. You left out the part where he wasn't immediately elected as prime minister, so I wonder what was the reasoning behind it?
Time. There's a lot that we left out, you know. I mean, there's just, you can't. We initially conceived this as a mini-series because there's so much if you go back to the beginnings of this struggle in you know, 91 and even actually 88. But we just had to, Well,
the question was that Nikol Pashinyan wasn't elected immediately. There was another week of deliberation. He was elected prime minister after.
Yeah, they tried to, if you're not aware of the story, they first, when they elected, this is the second time. The first time they rejected his candidacy for prime minister, and there was a lot of, you know, there's a lot of game playing, a lot of dirty stuff. And it was the second time, 14 days later, that they finally were pressured by, you know, the masses who never left the streets. So it was that is a whole little mini battle that we just didn't have room for in this particular.
There's a feeling that when the fireworks happen and the resignation happens, the movie's kind of over, and we're already abusing your patience by kind of making you sit through another 10 minutes of kind of a wind down. So that extra battle, which was going to end up in victory, wasn't quite working for. And there's a lot that's left out. I mean, movies are about framing. You choose your frame, you leave a lot out of it. There are a lot of unsung heroes who didn't make it into this movie. We did our best.
In the 10-part episode, it's totally going to be in there. Question up here.
What was going on in your mind when you saw this failure after failure of this movement? And you can see it in your film. So I want to ask you what was going on in your mind.
So what was going on in your mind when you saw failure after failure of the initial stages of this?
Failure within the first days or within the backstory of the revolution? For 10 years or the 40 days?
No, 40 days.
40 days.
And 10 years.
And 10 years adds Terry George. Terry George is the director of Hotel Rwanda. And the promise, the untold story of the Armenian genocide which Terry George brought to life. And so the Armenian people owe a major debt of gratitude to you, Terry. Thank you.